All right. Well, welcome you three. Thank you for attending, and we're just going to dive right in and talk about objectives today, and this should help you with your upcoming assignment. So let me share my screen with my slides, and we'll get started and then go over any questions, and hopefully they might have a question that maybe was on your mind. So and at any time you three can chime in and say anything you want. All right, so today we are going to talk about the difference between a mission statement, goals, and objectives when developing a program. We're going to talk about the different levels of objectives, because in our assignment, we're going to have to create process, impact, and outcome objectives. And a lot of times, I know when I was an undergrad and we talked about SMART objectives, I didn't really understand that there were different levels. I just was like, oh, an objective is an objective. And even in my MPH program, it wasn't that clear. So I want to make sure that you understand that, because it's really important we're hitting all levels of that. Are you three familiar with SMART objectives?
Just from the reading.
Okay, all right. Okay, so it's not something that you had in your undergrad. So perfect. We'll cover all that today. And then we're going to talk about acceptable verbs to use when creating SMART objectives. So say you're applying for a grant or giving a presentation, you don't want them all to be like describe, 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 right? You want to measure different levels of understanding and comprehension and all that stuff there. Let me let a few people in the waiting room. Hi, Seth and Thomas. I'm just giving a quick presentation on objectives right now, and then we can have time for any questions afterwards, since this is going to be a big part of our next upcoming assignment. All right, and at any time, ask any questions or participate if you need to. All right, so thinking big picture, you usually move in the direction of a mission statement, goals, and then objectives are more specific. So let's talk about mission statements real quick. And I think this is just a fun activity just to show how powerful mission statements can be in one sentence. So the point of a mission statement is to explain the cause of the organization. So what's this organization? You can put it in the chat or unmute yourself if you know. But this is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. What organization do you think would have a mission statement like this? Any guesses?
Like Wikipedia?
Very close. Google. This is Google's mission statement. Yes, to organize the world's information, make it universally accessible and useful. Wikipedia would have been good for that too. Spread ideas. This one's tricky. TED Talks. That's their mission statement. Spread ideas. To connect the world's professionals to make them more productive and useful.
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, yes, yes. For those of you who came in, we're just discussing mission statements for organizations and why it's really, if you have a good mission statement, everyone should know what you do. To inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time.
That's Starbucks.
It's Starbucks, yep, it's Starbucks.
They've killed their mission. They don't have people come in anymore, but it's fine.
Right, I know. Yeah, so that's why it's really important. Are you following your mission statement? And then the last one I have is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors.
USAID, maybe? I don't know.
It's the American Red Cross. Very, very close. Yes. Yep. All right. Yeah. So these are just very brief examples of mission statements. And you might work for a nonprofit that has one. Maybe you work for an organization that has one. Universities have one. Departments have them. But why do we have it? And it's a short narrative that describes the purpose and focus of a program. Are you ever wondering if there's a service you want to use or maybe a nonprofit to donate to? You want to kind of know what their purpose and focus is. Maybe you want to put your child in a school or a daycare. What's their mission? What's their focus? And does it match what you find important in your life? And this guides the program planner in the development of program goals and objectives. So we don't create a mission statement in this class, but I do think it is important to understand what mission statements are. Because it's the whole purpose of doing what you're doing. It's the whole purpose of your program, right? Like, why are you doing this? To reduce rates of childhood obesity, to increase reading, to make or to help students feel less depressed, right? Like, you have a purpose and a focus for why you're doing something, why you care about it. And I have the pages at the bottom of our textbook if you're following along, but these mission statements are often used in worksite settings, school settings, healthcare settings, and community settings, as I mentioned there. And the book gives examples of what this might include. But so for a community setting, you know, the mission might be to provide a wide variety of primary prevention activities for residents in the community. It's very broad, but it says what the focus is: primary prevention activities. And of course, that can mean a variety of things, but that's why the goals and objectives get more specific. In a healthcare setting, the mission might be for a program at helping patients and their families cope with physical and emotional changes associated with recovering following cancer surgery. So it's really important. So if someone reads this like, oh, I'm recovering from, I'm on kidney dialysis, this really wouldn't be the best organization for me to get involved with our program. I should look for something else. And it answers your question right away. So you know if it's something that would help or be beneficial for you. All right, so then let's move from that image. We have mission and now we have goals. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of times people get goals and objectives intertwined. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people say a SMART goal. And I always want to say, hold up, there's no such thing as a SMART goal. Because first bullet here, goals are very broad statements that describe the expected outcome. And SMART objectives are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So how can you say something is specific and broad at the same time? You can't. So a goal is just very basic to the point. What's my goal here? I want to eliminate childhood measles in Kansas City. I'm not saying how I'm going to do it. I'm not going to say by what percent. I'm not saying my time frame. I'm not saying my activities, right? I'm just saying my goal is to eliminate childhood measles. Have you ever had a goal? I want to run a half marathon. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to travel, you know, overseas, right? Reduce the incidence of influenza in residents of Delaware County. It's just very basic to the point. So remember that they provide direction for the program, are general in nature, do not have specific deadlines, and they're not measurable, right? It's not like I want to evaluate or improve or increase. You're just saying, you know, what you want to do. And you are going to share a goal for this assignment. You're going to have a quick goal for what your program plans to do. I don't know if any of you have thought of this yet, but you know, maybe just reduce falls in older adults, or increase healthier options for elementary kids at school, right? It's just very basic there. And you're just going to, when you start this assignment, just share what your goal of your program is. And if anyone has an idea of what they're thinking a goal is at any time, you can put it in the chat and I'll be like, yeah, that's perfect. Or let's tweak that. And same with objectives. Great time to share if you started working on this. So does that make sense for goals? Goals are really easy to understand. It's just basic statement. I want to read to my son more. All right, so then objectives. These are precise statements of the program outcome. They represent small steps that when completed will assist in achieving the program goal. So it's basically saying, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds. How am I going to do that, right? You're talking about how you can achieve that goal. And they must be written in measurable terms. So this is table 6.3, 140. Hopefully that page is still right. Probably not. I'm always making mistakes. But know that like when you use measurable terms, the one word I see students use a lot is the word understanding, but it's really hard to measure understanding. This should say the measure outcome verbs. This is going to be on page 139, not 140. Sorry for that. But you can't measure understanding. Like, how am I going to measure that Liz understands what I'm saying right now? You know, I can have her describe something, I can have her write something, I can have her take a test, but I can't just measure understanding by me telling her something and her sitting there, right? So understanding typically isn't the best word to use. So if you catch yourself saying that, maybe think like, okay, maybe they can discuss this topic, they can, you know, evaluate this. And then, as I mentioned, there's 3 objective types that we're gonna look at, and this is process, impact, and outcome. And you are going to have to create outcome objectives, impact, and process. So it's really important you understand which category is what while still making them smart. Okay, so again, just to make sure you understand the difference between a goal and an objective for running. My goal, I want to run the Boston Marathon. Not really, I have no idea desire to do that. And then an objective will be, I will complete the Boston Marathon on April 15th, 2025 in under 4 hours by adhering to my training plan. See, you know, it's very detailed. It tells you when it is, how I'm gonna do it, what time I want. So let's look at process objectives. And this is the first one. And this is the daily tasks, activities, work plans that lead to the accomplishment of all the other level of objectives. So it focuses more on program resources and stakeholder input. So these are things like you would make an objective about trainings held. Did brochures get handed out? Is your staff trained? Did people attend the session, right? Did you stay on schedule? Did you hire people, right? It's all the things that have to happen in order for you to achieve your goal, right? So let's say I want to reduce the percentage of people or high school kids that vape. Well, guess what? Me training the staff isn't gonna reduce it, but it needs to happen so they can then train the students, right? So these are like the things that you need to have. I need to have 12 sessions held, you know, in order for there to be a good outcome. So a SMART objective for that would be like by December 15th, 2025, 12 sessions will be held on a plethora topic regarding vaping for high school kids or something like that, right? Like, so that's great, that stuff needs to happen for there to be change. Does that make sense? And it's, go ahead, Liz.
Roger, I'm watching. Would this also include would you include like capacity building? So if you needed to like hire staff, would you put that in one goal about like hiring and training them together as part of a process objective, or would that be like 2 separate like objectives for
Yeah.
like hiring a certain number, and then like in the case of for mine intervention, it's going to require a hiring and then training of those staff to do the other thing that we want to do.
Yep, so I try to avoid double barrel questions, objectives when possible. So hiring and training are both very different things. I worked on a grant once and they had to hire 5 people and then train 5 people. Well, guess what? They hired 5 people and then only 3 people completed the training because 2 people quit. So that would be 2 different objectives. Hire 5 people. Yes, we hired 5 people. Train 5 people. Unfortunately, we only trained 3 due to these 2 quitting, so we have to go back and hire 2 more people. So I typically, if you like see an and, I probably would make them 2 separate ones. But yeah, if you need to hire, train, find a building, rent out a room, you know, reserve a covering at a park, right? That would all be a process objective. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. That's helpful.
And you don't want to forget that stuff, right? Because in order to have this stuff, like, did somebody contact the school to see if you can come in and speak? You know, did somebody get permission from the parents to let the kids attend this sexual health education presentation, right? So this is like the stuff that makes it go. So for an example, I have 2 right here. By the end of our 4-week program, we will have trained 100 participants on how to administer Narcan, right? Because they need to know how to administer it if you're going to be helping people. And then another example would be, I'm clearly living in the past here. By December 2021, we will have hosted 10 online Narcan training modules, right? So this could also be participation based. You know, by December 2022, 80% of high school students enrolled in the club completed all the training, something like that. Does that make sense for process objectives?
It makes sense. I do have a quick question, sorry.
No, please.
This mostly applies to process, I think. Since we haven't really like finalized our intervention yet, how detailed should our process objectives be, slash can we change them in the future? Because I feel like I kind of know what I'm doing, but it might change a bit since we're supposed to find maybe a similar intervention. And process is very specific to what you're actually doing for your intervention. Like if you're going to train people online, then you know your intervention is going to be partially online.
All right, I'm gonna stop you here. So this is always like the what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? And I get this every semester, like, should we plan our intervention first or objectives first? And honestly, I don't know which one is either easier. For the sake of this class, we always focus on goals and objectives first, then intervention. And that's why this is more just like an activity to make sure you know how to write goals and objectives.
Okay.
And then when you write your intervention, you might be like, oh, I need to change this, but you should have a strong foundation of kind of what you want it to be. And then you're like, oh, it doesn't make sense to have online modules. I want to have in person. Or, you know, at first I was going to target all high school, but now I'm changing it to seniors, right? And this is going to change so much. You might, you know, go back and change something in your theory assignment, right? And but ultimately what Dr. Perry and I are looking for is that at the end of the semester, your paper all makes sense. Your objectives match your intervention. When you talked about what constructs you're using from the social cognitive theory, you actually include that in your objectives, right? So say you're talking in your social cognitive theory, you know, about how you just want to increase knowledge, teach, but you have no objectives about increasing knowledge. I'm gonna go, wait a second. You were just talking about how important this is, your interventions, teaching, you need to have an objective for that. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah, so this is just gonna be something you're just constantly editing.
May I ask a follow-up to that question?
Of course.
So in terms of how our next assignment will be graded, so say we kind of demonstrate in our paper like an understanding of what our population is and what our kind of goals and outcomes are going to be, and we kind of show how this is how we would translate it, but then you or Dr. Perry are kind of like, we get it, but this is kind of maybe not super realistic, or we think it could be better in like X, Y, or Z ways. Will we necessarily get penalized that in the grading, or would that just be kind of, you know, you showed this connection, which is the objective for this assignment. Here's what you should do for your final paper. Is that more how it would work? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we will definitely give you lots of feedback on this. The only way you will lose points is if you are just completely skipping it. Like say you're like, I'm just gonna turn in 2 process objectives and not do the other one. Or, you know, like say you just only turn in a goal, right? Like if you attempt this, we will definitely give you feedback. I'll be like, hey Liz, I know you said that you wanted to have a program that, you know, provides training for every caregiver of someone with dementia, but that's 40 million people. Do you really think you can do that in 2 days? Right? I might just be like, all right, Liz, let's think what we can realistically do, and I'll put that in the comments, but she's not gonna lose points for it. As long as you're trying to show, like, I understand that this needs to be smart, you know, you do your best, you won't lose points, and we will give you feedback on it. Think of it as like, this is just a draft for your final paper. As long as you're trying, you're getting, the biggest thing, get it in on time, right? You know, if you do it perfectly, but you submit it Wednesday, you're gonna lose points rather than someone who got it in on Sunday and maybe made a few errors. They might lose like 2 points, right? So just make sure you get it on time, you do your best, and we'll give you feedback, and then incorporate that feedback to the final paper. That's what Dr. Perrin and I care about. You know, reading those needs assessments took a lot of time, right? Like, and we want to give you that time, right? It would be terrible if we were just like, hey, good job, and didn't even read it. So what we're just looking for is you make the changes for the final paper. So we just want you to make sure you understand it. So don't be nervous about it. I mean, a lot of times people work on groups when developing goals and objectives too for organizations. So it's not going to be perfect, and our advice might not be perfect either, but as long as you do your best and try to at least come up with some process impact and outcomes, you'll do fine. I've had students in the class who I'm like, I think you got very confused. This isn't process, this is an outcome, or this isn't impact and we fix it. Or other people have them labeled perfectly, but they're not smart. So we'll help you. Don't sweat it. Other questions?
Perfect.
Yep,
Thank
yep, no problem. Okay, so that's what process is. Think about what needs to be done in order for your program to be successful. So then impact objectives. This describes the immediate observable effects of a program. So once the program is done, right, you did those trainings, you taught everyone what they needed to do, you had the community garden, you trained the staff on how to administer Narcan, you did whatever you need to do. What do you hope will be the immediate objective? Do you hope that they have awareness on the topic? Maybe they didn't know that their blood pressure should be, you know, in this range, or maybe they didn't know that all the harmful effects from vaping or whatever, right? So, or maybe they don't have the skills to cook, you know, or, you know, make meals with vegetables. So what are you hoping happens at the end? They go home with more awareness, knowledge, attitude, skills, maybe even just a new attitude change on something. So that would be a learning impact objective. And you might have environmental ones, you might have behavioral, you might have learning. It's going to be different on everyone's programs, but these are just examples of things that you might want to see happen immediately after the program. Modified behavior, right? So say your goal is to, you know, decrease childhood obesity or something. That's like your mission statement, right? At the end of your class, it's not like everyone from your class will be, you know, not obese anymore, but maybe they could have a behavior change of, I'm eating more fruits and vegetables, I'm limiting sugary beverages, I'm not doing this, right? I quit smoking, I limited the amount of alcoholic beverages I'm, you know, doing. I started running, right? So what are those immediate impacts you want? I am making sure that I'm putting sunscreen on, right? I'm making sure I'm putting a hat on my child when they're outside. So those are some immediate behavioral changes. When I go gambling, I'm only going to take a $20 bill with me and I won't spend more than that, right? And then environmental, these could be maybe removing a barrier, changes to the environment, making it more safe, protections added to the environment. Maybe you might not have a lot of environmental things, but say for something, the topic is falls for you, right? And maybe you change the environment by having a ramp. You know, when someone's not climbing the stairs, or you have like a life alert in your house, right? Or maybe an older adult didn't have a cell phone, and they just had the house phone, but you give them a cell phone so they can take it around, so they can update someone if something happens, right? So these are the immediate observable effects of the program. And as I said, learning, behavioral, and environmental are the three areas we see those in. So, and then, do I not have outcome? Oh yeah, let me go back to outcome real quick. Okay, nope, I did it right. All right, I want you to be able to identify if something is learning, environment, or behavior. That's where I was going for this one. Okay, so by the end of the session, participants will be able to recall the 3 different types of impact objectives. What would that be? Learning, environment, or behavior?
That's learning, right? Because it's knowledge.
Yep, if you learn it and you know that, so, you know, their learning environment behavior, then you learn, right? That's a knowledge objective. Next one, by the end of our program, participants will be able to walk a mile in under 16 minutes. Is that environmental or behavior?
Behavior.
Yep, behavior. They're changing a behavior, they're walking and they're doing it faster. And then by May 2025, we will establish a once weekly farmers market at Knox County Health Department. And that's environment. You're right, you're changing the environment to give individuals access to fruits and vegetables or whatever at the farmers market. All right. So then outcome objectives. This is further down the future, right? So the ultimate objective of a program aimed at the changes in health status, social benefits, risk factors, or quality of life. And a lot of times these don't get measured. Funding ends, people move on to the next project. It's really hard to measure. And but the good news is if these objectives are achieved, the overall goal of your programs are then achieved too. And know that this isn't gonna happen very quickly. So I might see something like you know, say you're focused on smoking, right? And then you want them to have knowledge gained behavior change, their environment change, so they're not, you know, in a situation where they're smoking, right? And then maybe you want to see like decrease in lung cancer rate, right? That's not gonna happen in a week. It's not gonna happen in a very long time, especially if you're looking at high school students. They're not the ones dying from lung cancer, right? So this can be very, very far in the future. I also sometimes see students say too, like, there's gonna be a 50% decrease in high school students who smoke. That's quite aggressive, right? You know, if we're seeing like I'm not trying to be hurtful, but like your program is not going to cut the rate in half, right? We need to think realistically, like, okay, what can happen when we see programs are done? What percentage of change are we actually seeing? So you want to, that's where that achievable thing really makes sense. Like if I told you all, I'm training for a marathon and I want to finish it in under 3 hours, that's not gonna happen. Like there's no way I can run a 3-hour marathon. That's not achievable, right? Even if I had everything right, it's not gonna happen. So what can you actually do? If you say, I want to educate all the parents in the state of Tennessee, really, you're gonna educate every single parent in the state of Tennessee? Like, no, you're not. Let's think realistically of what we actually can do. So by 2028, the total on-campus sales of energy drinks will have decreased by 10%, right? That's a big outcome objective. We taught students about harms of energy drinks. We hope that they have behavior change of consuming less, they have the knowledge of it. And then what should the outcome objective be? There's gonna be a decrease in sales, right? If your program was effective on that. Does that make sense with the outcome? So that's like kind of like big picture, like a reduction in, you know, smoking rates or lung cancer or falls or something like that. Like that's like your ultimate goal. Decrease in gambling, binge drinking for college students. Okay, so then let's take a step back. So when you're writing your process, impact, and outcome objectives, you want them all to be SMART. So I've said this before, but specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time phase. So the specific is the who and what. College students, older adults, people living in Tennessee. The measurable is going to be how much change is expected. 10%, 5 people, 100 people. What do you hope to happen? Can the objective be accomplished with our existing resources and time? So can you actually do what you plan to do with 2 staff members? What realistically and achievable can happen? Realistic, it addresses the scope of the problem and proposes reasonable steps of solution. And then time phase just is when you want this to happen. And I'm going to share an example of an objective and you're going to share, oh, that's where it's specific, that's where it's measurable. And I think this kind of just makes it easy to look at. We'll go back to that one in a second. Okay. So by December 2026, a minimum of 25 program participants have stopped smoking e-cigarettes. So is it specific? That's the who and what, right? Yeah, it's the program participants, right? Do I have it? Yeah, oh, there it is. Oh, it came up. All right, so the when is the time phase, right? This is being silly. Okay, that's when it is. By December 2024, this will happen. The how many, it's measurable, 25. Who? Program participants. What you hope will happen? Stop smoking e-cigarettes, right? And then I think it's very realistic. 25 program participants, yeah, the organization can handle that. By December 2024, yes, that's time phase, it's achievable. So just when you're writing these, ask yourself as an answer, who, what, when, how many, and how much. Let me go back to this slide a little bit. So just to make sure you guys know the examples are the differences between goals and objectives. Goals are broad, objectives are specific. A goal is often qualitative and subjective, and an objective is quantitative. It can be difficult to measure progress towards a goal, and it can be easily tracked and measured for an objective, right? Are you exercising 4 times a week? Goals can be flexible and adaptable, and objectives are rigid and specific. A goal is often used to inspire and motivate, and an objective is used to guide and measure. And so increase revenue by 20% or improve customer satisfaction. I don't really like the increased revenue by 20%. That's getting a little specific for me, but improve customer satisfaction would be a really good goal there. And then how are you going to improve customer satisfaction? By reducing employee turnover by 10% by the end of the year. So, or by Q3 or something like that. Not the best ones, but it gives just a little more explanation on goals versus objectives. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Okay, so program participants, oh, this is what we have. What's missing in this one? I'll give you the answer for this one and you can do the next one. So program participants will stop smoking by the end of the program. What we're missing here is how many program participants. Do you want 50% of your program participants to stop smoking by the end? You can do a percentage or you can do a number, right? It always just kind of the answer is which one's better. It kind of just depends what you want there. We can talk about it a little bit later, but sometimes I personally like percentages, because what if I said like 8 program participants will stop smoking by the end of the program, right? And by the end of recruitment, I was only able to get 8 people, right? That means I'm shooting 100% right there, right? And that can be a little tricky, and you don't ever want to not hit your objectives. So I would maybe say like, what sounds reasonable? 50%, 40%, but you don't ever want to say 100%. So what's missing in this one? We will see a 10% decrease in smoking by December 2021 as a result of this program. What's missing there?
Who?
Yep, who? Who will see a 10% decrease? The university students, my parents, right? And then a minimum of 25 participants will stop smoking as a result of our program. What's missing there?
The when, like by when.
Yep, when? Tomorrow, 50 years from now, right? So it's really important to make sure we're answering the who, what, when, how much, how many. So this is in your book too. I should have labeled this one too, but if you're ever struggling with like what SMART objective word could we use? There's a whole list right here, page 139 in your book, talking about words you can use. And in our module, I believe we talk about Bloom's taxonomy when it talks about different levels of measuring too, like is it knowledge, is it doing, is it, all the different levels of this. But feel free to try to just have a little bit of variety when you're writing your objectives. But typically I like to sometimes start with by the end of this year, students will blah, blah, blah. Other people like to leave their time at the end. It's kind of just preference on what you do there. So, all right, so that's my presentation I have for you all. Any questions or do you want me to pull up the assignment?
I have a question. I feel like I always have so many questions.
I love it, it's great.
Do we need to incorporate like either in our process objectives or maybe this is going to be a different section for our final project, like the actual evaluation component? So like when we're thinking about these, sometimes I just work with the Department of Health now. There's like costs associated with picking your objectives and how you're going to measure it. And so do we need to include that part in this assignment or somewhere
You're
else?
about like 5 assignments too early, but I love
Okay.
that you're thinking that, because Liz, when you're writing your objectives, you can say in the back of your mind, how would I evaluate this, right? And if you know in the back of your mind how you could evaluate it and it can be done easily, then great, you're gonna crush the next assignment. So then, not the next assignment, like assignment 10 is creating evaluation questions for your objectives. So if you're like, enroll 100% or not 100, enroll 100 college students in my nutrition class by December 2024. So then your evaluation question, that'd be easy, right? Did you enroll 100 college students in your course, right? So if you can answer it and you know how you would do it, then you're good.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so you don't have to create the matching evaluation questions yet. We will do that like maybe in like 6 weeks.
Okay, great.
Yep. Other questions? All right, so let me pull up. Yeah, that's Sorry if that's where the confusion was, but this is still just good chatting office hours. So let's go to, oh, one thing I did just want to share for you all, and if people are watching this. I feel like the next couple weeks should be really kind of a breath of fresh air after you all completing your fishbone assignment and needs assessment. So this week we have the integration of theory and then the program goals and objectives, but I feel like these go hand in hand. You know, once you understand the theory, what you kind of understand what direction you want to go in, and then you can create your program goals and objectives. And then module 7 is going to be, wait, that's where we're at now. Yeah. Okay, this is where we're at now. Just kidding. All right. Module 8. I was like, wait a second. Module 8 is 2 weeks long. Because fall break is next week. And I always kind of got frustrated as a student when like you had fall break, but then your workload was just the same. And it's like, oh, so fall break just means I have to get all my work done in Wednesday through Friday. So this is going to be a 2-week module. And you get to actually look at existing programs that are out there that are about your topic, and you get to learn what they did, what they learned. And that's why I have this assignment done, so that before you actually create your intervention, because you might learn a thing or two about a program out there that's similar to yours. And we can talk about that one at another time, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then you get to look at resources you have, people who could partner with you, and barriers you have there. So all right, let's go to the program goals and objectives. All right, so for this, I feel like this shouldn't be too overwhelming, especially after what you just did there, but what you're going to do is develop a goal statement for this project. So you just need to list one goal that you have, and then you're going to create objectives using the SMART format that we discussed. So you're going to have 2 process objectives. So Liz, for you, seems like you already have 2. If you want to make more, that's great, but you know, yours was about hiring and training, right? So I plan to hire 5 employees by November 1st, 2024. By December 1st, 2024, their training will be complete, right? Of course, that's not SMART, but you get the hint of what I'm saying there. And then the outcome, or that should be flipped a little bit. The impact, so 1 midterm, 1 long term. So, you know, maybe one that could be about like knowledge gained at the end of the training. And there might be, the reason why some are midterm and some are long term, because maybe someone might not act, maybe you want it to be, participants will be smoke-free for 2 months after the program, right? So that would be not right away, and that would be long-term. And don't stress too much about if they're midterm or long-term. Just actually kind of ignore that. Just think about your impact that you want right after the end of the program, that knowledge, that behavioral, that environmental. I'll update this as well. And then the outcome objectives. So what's your overall outcome? Do you want there to be a decrease in heat-related deaths? Do you want there to be a decrease in skin cancer diagnosis? Do you want there to be, you know, higher rates of screenings for this? Whatever it is, that long-term outcome. Does that make sense? So all you really need to do, I'm going to fix this, that you have 2 process, 2 impact, and 2 outcome objectives in 1 goal. Does that make sense there? I'm going to edit this assignment for you all there, so. And this is where the 100 points, and again, don't sweat it if something's not in the right category. But it's okay, we'll give good feedback on that. Other questions? Sydney, I know you had some about the theory.
Yes, but it's kind of like really specific to my my topic and my assignment. And I thought it was gonna be like a I thought it was gonna be a smaller office hours because I wanted to meet with Dr. Perrion individually, but like her schedule wasn't loading like the times, like the photo she sent. So
Okay,
if anybody else has
her
any-
link is always the same. So if you
right,
click on,
but
what
what
was
are the
it?
hours? Like what are her hours?
I don't know off the top of my head, but if they're not loading, you can always email her, but she has office hours, every day during the week. So, but I mean, there's only 7 of us here, we have 15 minutes still to talk about things, so if you have a question, go for it.
Yeah, so just like overall, as I've been like working on my topic, it feels kind of broad and not as specific. So I'm looking at sorry, let me pull it up. I'm looking at like preterm birth rates and like Black women, but I'm not sure if I should make my topic more specific or more broad. Well, the thing is, I didn't know if I should focus more on like preterm birth rates in general, or if I should focus more. I like the thing is, I think I need to change my topic a bit to make it more accessible or more approachable. And at first, I was focusing on like just in general, but I'm trying to narrow it down to like women in like to women in Tennessee, but I'm having a lot of trouble like finding data just for the state. So like I'm not sure like kind of like moving forward what I should be.
Okay, I mean, you already completed your needs assessment, right?
Right. And it honestly wasn't the best. I was dealing with like a death in the family, so it really wasn't like it probably should be redone.
I mean, as long as you know that something is an issue and that, you need a program to help it. I mean, that part's already done. I mean, if you can find rates at the US level or state level, that's obviously helpful, but we're now just trying to think of how we could help that topic. Does that make sense? We just wanted to understand it as much as possible and really know that this is an issue we should spend our time on. So I mean, if you were in your needs assessment, were understanding that, this is, yeah, thank you, Liz. I was gonna say, I know it's out there. Liz just shared a link
Well, I
about,
think specifically, oh, I'm sorry.
good.
It's like specifically I'm pointing to like preeclampsia as like a cause as like my biggest reason for like, oh, this is what's like that's what we can account a lot of preterm birth rates to. But like obviously there's many more factors, but that's like the factor I'm choosing to focus on. And like the state of Tennessee hasn't released like their preeclampsia data, is what I was saying.
Is there older years with preeclampsia data?
Yeah, I hadn't seen any because like at least on the report I had, it said like Tennessee did not release. So it's kind of like I don't know if I should be very broad because if it's very broad, that makes it like a bit harder for me to like assess the needs. And then I also wanted to tackle it at the angle of like patient education. And a lot of the studies I'm finding are like not really done in the US. So I don't know how generalizable that is either.
Okay, let's go back to the needs. I mean, if you just find, I mean, preeclampsia is a huge problem in the US. Like, I think that if you just can show morbidity, mortality, all that stuff associated with it, if it's not Tennessee specific, you could use another state, you could just base it off US data. I mean, if it's not out there, it's not out there, but I mean, I don't think there is an issue in having your program for preeclampsia.
Okay.
And then what was the other one about?
I'm sorry. What was I lost my other question?
Yeah.
Yeah, just like on like planning the best intervention on like what would fit first. Like, obviously there's a lot of infrastructural like issues, but I just don't really like if I'm saying like my I want my interventions to be like patient education. A lot of the studies I'm finding that are supporting patient education are like outside of the US. So again, I don't know how generalizable that is.
I mean, so we're gonna do the best we can. There might not be a perfect program out there, but that's the next assignment that we'll work on, and I'll give you more instructions about how to find a program that's similar to it. And sometimes you might find a program that's, maybe it was in the US, but it was for I'm trying to think gestational diabetes or something like that. And you might be like, oh, like that's similar enough. Like maybe I can implement some of those strategies for preventing preeclampsia for women. Does that make sense? So, I mean, if there's not a program out there, I mean, there's obviously a need for this, right? Like this is a huge topic. That means that there needs to be more programs out there. So I always, when students panic, like there isn't something out there that fits my exact topic of program, like that's okay. I mean, maybe there isn't one, right? And that's why new programs are created all the time. And in this class, we're creating a program, right? And we're just trying to use best practices of what has been done. And we want to have the data out there to support that this is actually a need and we should focus on this. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, because I was like, I know I need like evidence to like back this up, so it was a bit difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to look around on my own, but I don't know off my head, but I'm definitely, I'm sure it's out there if you, you know, take like an hour and just try to really research and narrow it down, so,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Other questions?
I had a question.
Yeah.
So for my vulnerable population paper, I think Dr. Perrion is who graded mine. And so I didn't get any points off for citing. She said that all of my citing was good, but then for my needs assessment, the bulk of the points that I got off were for citations. And so I know she like marked where I needed to fix things, but a lot of what was in my needs assessment came from my vulnerable population paper.
Okay,
So I don't know, like in my final submission, if I need to fix those things in like, because like she was like, you need to cite every single sentence, even though it seems redundant. And I didn't do that in my vulnerable population. So I didn't do it in my needs assessment. So when I do the final, should I go back and correct my vulnerable population paper to like what I, submitted for my needs assessment, or like what she recommended to fix?
so for the vulnerable population assignment, we do not include that in our final program report. That was just kind of, so the reason why it was okay you didn't cite Seth is because that was just more you reflecting on what you think the problem is, what you experienced with your interviews and stuff like that. So it isn't worth citing. It's just you kind of brainstorming what you think it is and learning from someone in the population. So that's okay, you didn't cite that. And then for the needs assessment, that's more specific, like what's the literature telling us about this topic, right? So that's why, that one is more factual, not opinion based. So that's probably why you got some deductions for that. So like even if you're citing an article and you have like 3 sentences in a row from that article, you have to make sure you cite that article every time, right? So like
Okay.
watching 2024, watching, and it looks kind of silly.
Yeah.
But that's what you read from the article and that's what you're reporting on. So that is completely okay. I know
Okay.
there's an old school of thought on it, and I actually know I definitely learned this in school at one point. People used to just say, if you have a few sentences from an article, you just cite it at the end. And that's outdated. We put it after every sentence that is in
Okay.
our original thought. So go through and fix that for the needs assessment.
Okay.
If you have questions on it, reach out to either her or I, and we can let you know if you're doing it right. But you don't have to fix the vulnerable population assignment.
Okay, I was just confused because I thought we included the vulnerable population paper in the final submission. So I was just like, okay, so if I don't need to fix it here, then why am I fixing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
I
that
can see
makes
how that's
more sense.
confusing. Yeah, that's just to get
Okay.
us going because we aren't collecting primary data, so just kind of like an activity to dive into the needs assessment.
Okay, all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you for answering my email, and the lecture and the feedback in the email definitely helped a lot.
Good, thank you. You were definitely on the right track of grouping them in outcome, process, and impact, just if you could just tweak a couple of those things for SMART, you're in the right direction.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yep, see ya. Juliana, go ahead.
Sorry, my computer just died when in the middle of us talking, and so I was just like, I'll join again. But I think most of my questions were answered today. Let me double check. Oh, I had a question about knowledge. So increasing knowledge, I guess, how would you measure like a survey?
Yep, so when we measured knowledge for like a gambling program I did, in order to do that, we did a pre-test like at the beginning of the session. So like when everyone got there, before we did any education, anything, we gave them a survey like asking, like true and false questions, multiple choice, and then they kind of got a grade on it. They don't know that, right? And you have that, and then they have like a secret code or something so you can match it. Right, because people don't want to put their names and information on it. They might feel like, oh, I don't want them to know it's me, right? You don't want it to be identifiable. And so then at the end of the session, you can give them the same questions and see, you know, did their score increase? Did they get this right? Right? So that's definitely a way that I always increase knowledge, because if you just give them something at the end, how do you know that they learned it from your program? What if they already knew it, right? So pre and post test is the way to go to see if there's an increase in knowledge.
Just making sure before I write it all down and it's absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
So
Yep, you're good.
perfect, cool. A lot of like the process is I'm like, can I realistically do this kind of stuff? So hopefully it turns out all right.
I mean, and again, this is practice, right? You know, it's not real
Yeah.
life. So, you know, give yourself some grace on it. But like the one thing, like I was just talking to a student and they were doing theirs in like Phoenix, Arizona, and they wanted to like give materials to like 65% of adults in the area. And I was like, whoa, let's do a second. Like, do you have enough resources to give out 2.7 million brochures to people, right? Like
Yeah.
let's narrow it down. Is there a city you want to focus on, or is there like you know, like an age group or something like that? So I mean, as long as you're like trying your best to narrow down, that's all that matters.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.